All right. So for today's heartbeat, I've got Russell from the Canadian Conservative Podcast. He's out of Saskatchewan, and he's been running his podcast since about 2019. Uh, and just talking about ideas behind the conservative policies and kind of what's going on in Canada. I think he's an important voice, and I like everybody else's voice. So Russell, why don't you give us just like the quick elevator speech? Tell me a little bit about how you got into the podcast, and we'll just kind of hop into a conversation after that.
Yeah, thanks, Sheldon, for inviting me on to your show today. Really appreciate it. I got started in podcasting in 2019. After my mother died, I decided that I wanted to try something different. Just kind of, you have one of those moments where the finality of life kind of hits you and you realize that the end's coming for everyone at some time. So I was like, I've always liked podcasts, like listening to them, and I've always liked talking to people. So I thought, I'll try podcasting, and I started just talking to just friends, people I knew, random people that I just messaged that just said, I think you got an interesting story. You want to talk about it. And then I noticed that the numbers seem to gravitate towards the political stuff. People like the political stuff, and people were saying, do more political stuff. And so, yeah, I just started doing more political stuff. And of course, all of a sudden, because we can't have any nuance or anything, and you get thrust into the culture war, and all of a sudden you're in one camp and you're talking policies, and the other camp's telling you that you're an awful, terrible person for it. And you know what? That's all right. I'm here for it.
Yeah, it takes some pretty big shoulders. Now, you're you're kind of youngish. I mean, you're about 15 years my junior. And so to have you inside of a political conversation, I'm going to say is exceptional because like even my kids around about your same age, they talk a little bit about politics, a little bit about what they see, but they're definitely not immersed into the culture. So like I really do have to congratulate you on that.
Well, thanks, Sheldon. My head's not going to fit through the door now, but I appreciate it. Well, just, not just politics. I've always been interested in just kind of committee work and stuff like that. Like I've been involved in different committees and small towns, kind of mid-sized towns and that, like whether it being on a library board or whether it being part of, like, I've been a member of the Legion for a long time. So I've been on the executive committee of different Legion branches and just involved in different spheres within the community. And yeah, I don't know. That type of work always fascinates me, even stuff like writing grants and trying to, promote good causes in the community and volunteerism. It's always been a big factor for me, like a big attraction to just giving back to worthy organizations that are doing good things.
So those are some amazing things, but being on different boards and stuff, I think is what's lacking for a number of different reasons inside of Canada. One is that I'm not going to say conservatives. I want to say everybody's, kind of preoccupied with their families and with their work, and especially now with the affordability crisis, it's not easy to do those things. And because some of those things have slidden over to the other side, we're now starting to see some of the woke lunacy that none of us are really appreciating, or that has added zero benefits to Canada or Canadians, Alberta or Saskatchewanians. Is that a
Well,
word?
well, I think a lot of I think it's a bit of a word, Saskatchewanians, or I don't. Yes, I think that's a bit of a word, I guess. Um, but I think a lot of it probably started, like a lot of things, with good intentions. This some of this woke stuff, people thought, oh, they just have good intentions. They just want a better world and things like that. And they kind of explained away. Some of it was, youthful ignorance and that. I'll tell you this. When I've seen people and they're marching in the streets and they're talking about inequality and how terrible everything is and awful, and they're not the people I see volunteering in the community. They're not the people I see working with, the most vulnerable in the community and trying to really rise people up out of poverty. I don't see them doing those types of things. What I see them doing is going out, making a big spectacle, me, maybe yelling at some cops or whatever, dressing all in black and utilizing rules for radicals or beautiful trouble or whatever else, Darvo tactics and that. And then they retreat back to their suburbs and that to mom and dad's basement, or they retreat back to, their nice job somewhere, and they move on with their lives and they get to say, well, I made a difference in that. Yeah, guess what? Sitting on a board is boring sometimes. Yes, things don't move. I wish sometimes things would move a lot quicker, but that's not the way the world works. Things take time. And you can't solve problems. If you can solve a complicated problem very quickly, then you've probably done some damage along the way. There's a lot of factors to complicated problems that we need to consider, and we need to make sure that we balance things out properly. Um, you know, take to the streets, pump the Marxist fist in the air, talk about smashing the system, destroy some windows, harass some working people at their jobs. I don't see how that actually solves anything. That to me doesn't solve anything. That's the brainwashing. I call them like the little revolutionaries, right? Like, they talk big, they look up their big revolutionary figures and they think, I'm going to be just like that, but they've accomplished nothing. And they actually haven't done anything to benefit society.
I think that's actually an excellent point, is that a lot of people that we do see out beating the streets. I mean, there are exceptionals, like leaders of some of these groups. I mean, sure, maybe they'll take some funds from their groups and try and pump it into something. I'm not going to go into, how wrong that could actually go, because we see that with charities across Canada. How many
Mhm.
charities that are sponsored by taxpayer dollars? How many charities that are sponsored by people that believe they're making a difference, that don't end up actually spending but a small percentage, 1 to 2%, where the funds were intended to go. So
Mhm.
it's it's not so much of, taking to the streets and waving your fist in the air. It can't be as simple as always just giving a couple of bucks. Is, if you want to make a difference, go out there and
Mhm.
be a part of the action. Showing up to rallies and showing up to some of the protests and stuff over the last few years, for me, has been some of the greatest experiences of my life. And even doing what I'm doing right now, I find the same. And that's, again, one of the reasons that I'm doing these HeartBeat episodes, is because I meet so many fantastic people that I want to get them involved in more than screaming about this on a platform, or showing up at a meeting, and everybody does the same sorts of things. They show up, and but they don't feel like their voices are getting heard, and that's the reason that I wanted to kind of use the platform they gave me to help promote their messages.
Well, I mean, maybe I should back up one step, like rallies and stuff like that. I don't think those are inherently bad. I attended some anti-COVID, rallies in Saskatoon and that during the mandates and that but that's a place to gather to find your tribe. That's what I like to say. Everyone needs to find their tribe. So you find like-minded people and that you talk with them, you network, and then you take what goes on at the rally. Like I consider rallies like more like networking events than anything else. And then you can turn that into action. But what happens is, and I'm not, and the conservatives can be like this too, where everyone shows up. They got the signs, they got the stuff. The media shows up, takes lots of pictures, screaming at each other, screaming at cops. Um, you know, and then at the end of the day, everyone disperses. They get back in their cars, they drive back home, and they're like, okay, I'm done now. It's very cathartic. They're getting all their emotion, their rage, their energy out. And then they're like, okay, I'm done. Oh, I'm done now. And they go back and they take the photos, they send the tweets. that sort of thing, and then they're done. And I think that's for a lot of these in Canada, especially, people are like, okay, now I'm good. And I'll send my memes out on social media, mocking the other side, mocking how dumb they are and stupid they are. But in the end, nothing's changed from the government, whether it be left or right. The government's still just doing whatever the hell they want. And I'll tie it quickly into a religious context. Like I'm a Catholic. I go to church. I haven't always been a great Catholic. I don't think any true, well, maybe some true Catholics will say that, you know, they've showed up the entire time. But I think people have their periods where they question and they have weak moments and strong moments. But I've always thought for years, um, we would have the envelope and we would give the envelope with the cash into the basket, and then the cash would disappear, and we knew that it was going towards charities and charitable stuff. But I kind of thought a few years later, I thought, to me, and I'm not disparaging, people are giving up their money and they're doing it for charity, and that should always be appreciated. So I don't want people to get the idea that I'm bashing on this, because I'm not. But that's the bare minimum. That's the bare minimum. Giving your cash away is the bare minimum. And I'm not saying that doesn't help. It absolutely helps. Apply your not alls. Um, but even better than giving the cash away is to show up at the event and volunteer at the event and help put the event together, take the event down, serve, be front facing. So serve the people in the community with whatever that money is used to purchase, whether it be food, necessities, um, showing up to someone's house who's had a flood and helping redo their basement and using the charitable funds from that, whatever it is. Um, while it's very appreciated, the money is needed. Without the money, it doesn't happen. But without the hands, the money is useless, and a lot of it ends up going into contractors' pockets and stuff like that, instead of just being used for resources. And then the labor can be done as more like a labor of love towards helping people.
And I think Danny Hozak said something about that too. I'd had him on a an episode or two ago, and he said it's not just a budget of finances to support a political party, but it's also a budget of time. So they have to go hand in hand. So I mean, it's an excellent message that you're sending.
Those little actions that we take to help other people, they can have big effects. You snow blow your elderly neighbor's driveway, and so they never slipped and fell and ended up in the hospital waiting 30 hours to see a doctor. You snow blow, the neighbor's driveway, and although they never said thank you, they came home, they had the worst day at work ever, just terrible, awful day, like punch the clock type of day. And they came home and they saw it was done. They were pulling up and they're thinking, Jesus, I do not want to have to do the driveway of nothing else. They're just done with the day. They pull in the driveway and they're like, someone did the driveway. One less thing I have to worry about. Thank goodness for that. And you don't know, like, it, because that's the nature of charitable work, is you'll never truly know the positive effects that your actions have had on other people. And I wrote about this in Wrong Speak Publishing. Um, Volunteerism is a dying trade in Canada. It really is. When I go into the community and I do volunteer work, I know almost all the volunteers in the community. It becomes like you become one of the regulars, because if you're volunteering at one place, you always end up volunteering somewhere else, because someone says, "Hey, we're short this weekend. Are you busy? We could use a hand," things like that. And so you end up and you find out who the regulars are, and you'll find out they're volunteering at three or four places. Most of them are retired, um, but there's people that are working full time that find the time after work and on the weekends and holidays and that to do charitable work. And those really are, like, we talk about unsung heroes in our communities. Um, when you go to your local Canada Day event, there's a very good chance that was put on by volunteers. people that weren't paid, but they love Canada and they love bringing people together to celebrate our country. And so, like, for like one of the local communities near where I live, it is the Legion and it is the Multicultural Council. And they every year they're all volunteers. No one's getting paid. And they put on Canada Day and they book everything, they get the grants going, and then the public shows up and they're participating and they're together and they're celebrating culture and no one got paid for that. And well, maybe through the grants, like the catering service got paid or something like that. But that's so incredibly important. Your Remembrance Day ceremony. People can hate on the Legion all they want. I mean, I'm a Legion member. I have my own thoughts on, some of the actions they took during COVID, some of their actions they've
They
taken
were a
over the
necessity
years.
though.
Yeah, and
In
some of the
order to
actions.
keep their business open. And I'm going to go to the bat for because inside of Calgary, everybody said the same thing. I can't support the Legion anymore because they had to go. And it's like, you know what? They had to keep their doors open. They're already working on a shoestring budget. It's
Mhm.
already the cheapest place in the city. You can go and have a beer and a bite. They're working with nothing. And in order to keep their doors open, this is what they had to do to make sure that they could keep their funding. So yeah, no, I appreciate, where everybody was with the whole, well, if a restaurant's going to ban me, then my business isn't good and I'm never going back. I appreciate people's standpoint on voting with their support for any organization. But I think the Legion during the COVID period was exceptional, and I don't think anybody gets a full grasp of what they were actually going through and what they're going through or what they were going through pre-pandemic and what they're going through post-scamdemic.
Well, and I think too, again with the Legion, I get there's criticism over the Legion's support over the Veterans Bill of Rights, which a lot of veterans say was more political and didn't fully represent the needs of veterans. The thing is, there's never going to be a perfect solution for everyone. Everyone wants a solution that's perfect for them, and that's not going to happen with any organization. I saw the videos of veterans wearing their medals and they go to the Legion on Remembrance Day and they're banging on the doors and they're saying, look, the Legion won't let a veteran in on Remembrance Day. Well, are you a member of that Legion? That's the problem. It's like, the Legion needs more people to join. The one that I was a part of a few years ago during COVID in a very small town I was living in at the time. I was on the executive, I was the president for a while. We got when COVID first, happened in Canada, we got everyone together. There was like 100 people, 100 members. The median age was over 80 years old, and they were scared because all the messaging is that COVID is killing elderly people, it's mostly affecting elderly people. So we had a vote, and they said we gotta, we didn't the Legion there didn't have a bar in it, and they said we're going to shut it down, we're going to see what happens. We adapted, people adapted, they did the long distance meetings. And then when Remembrance Day came around, we had a meeting and we're just like, okay, we're not going to be able to do an in-person Remembrance Day service. So what we did is we did a video broadcast, and people, we did everything we could based off of what the members wanted. And this is including members that are veterans too. Not just your affiliates or your associate members. These are ordinary members as well. And we arranged something, and I think it did what it needed to do to make sure that we were remembering appropriately and providing, that service to the community in a way that most people at the time felt safe doing.
It's about literally supporting the people inside of your community, right?
But but we live in a me society now. What's in it for me? What am I going to get out of it? It's like some people took rugged individuality and they teamed up with narcissism, and they decided that was going to be the way ahead for society. rugged individualism is good. Taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your community. Um, I think those are all good things, and it doesn't need to come from collective action. When I hear like we're only going to be able to take care of things through collective action, no, rugged individuality, and then shared vision. Because collectivism means that you all have to think the same. Everyone has to have the same thought pattern. If you don't, then you're cast out. You're like an apostate. You got to be cast out. Rugged individualism with shared goals, shared vision. And that's, to pivot a little bit, I guess, back to the political aspect, that is the biggest political shift I've seen. Like the the people on the left side of the spectrum, and that grows, in my opinion, ever increasingly extreme to be considered on the left side of the spectrum because the Overton window shifted so much. You have to agree with what the leaders say, and you have to agree with the tenets and the norms. You have to abandon yourself, and that what they like the Maoists, and that you have to interrogate your thoughts, and you have to cast aside any doubts in your mind. And so you join like this hive mind collective of people, and you get yourself all whipped up into a frenzy. And in my opinion, it's good in some ways for them because they decide, okay, um, let's say let's say you have a library and it's being run by the 80-year-old ladies, and they've run the library board forever. Well, you just know that you can subvert democracy if everyone goes in 3 days before their election, they all buy a $5 membership, they all show up, they all vote for who they want to be in, and then they instill themselves as the board members, and then they force their policies on everyone else. There's no individual thought. And they do that all the time. They do that all the time. Um, Whereas the problem on the right side of the spectrum is um, rugged individualism, and then what happens is that the what I call it, the tyranny of small differences tears apart organizations. And so if there some people on the right get together and they have a shared vision, let's say that um we need to, I don't know, um end homelessness, let's say. Instead of focusing on the shared vision and forming a committee and developing strategies and testing things out and seeing what works and then working towards a goal together, everyone wants their idea to be the idea. And then if someone doesn't follow that, then they're saying, well, you're really just a liberal light, or you're a fake conservative, or whatever. And then they turn on each other, and then nothing ever really gets done.
Yeah. And that's that whole me attitude, right? The whole narcissistic point of what you're doing. And it just never shows up as I've done this for because it needed to be done.
Well, I'll say this, Sheldon. The federal government is not going to save you. They're not going to save you, regardless of what political party is in power. They're not going to save you. The provincial government, regardless of what political party is in power, is not going to save you. The the municipal government in your area is your closest tie to democracy. It's where you have the most influence. And even in that sphere, they're probably not going to save you. It's going to be your community. It's going to be the people that you have built relationships with, that you can call at 2 o'clock in the morning when everything has gone wrong in your life, and they're there for you. It's going to be the job you find that has the boss where you can call the boss at 3 in the morning and say, listen, my dog's sick. I got to go to the hospital with my dog. And instead of them saying, well, it's just a dog, who cares? They're like, no, take care of your family member, and you let us know what we can do to support you. You got to find those jobs. You got to cultivate those jobs. That is what is going to make the difference. People always think, the feds, when are the feds going to save us? They're not going to save you. No one's coming to save you. You have to develop the community. You have to be that person for others. So those people can be that person for you when you need them. And that, in my opinion, is what we've lost. That's the Canadian spirit in some manner that's been taken from us in some ways, where we could rely on each other. And there's a million different factors. But for me, the number one factor, well, there's two factors that it comes down to, in my opinion. One, we got really, can I swear on this show?
Go ahead.
We got
I
really,
don't have I don't have a delicate crew.
okay. We got really fucking lazy. That's one thing. Despite the fact that we work harder than we've ever worked to make money that's probably less valuable than it's ever been, in many other aspects, we're lazy. Um, I'm really, really upset with my city council because they are instilling this zoning measure I don't like. But instead of going to the city council meeting tonight, I'm going to stay home, kick my feet up, take the cap off a beer, and I'm going to watch the game tonight. So are you really that committed? Can you really get that upset? I mean, you can get upset. There's nothing to say you can't. But where were you? Where were you? Well, you were sitting at home watching the game. Just like you were taking your ration, sitting in the Coliseum while the gladiators fought while Rome burns outside. You know, and then that's laziness is number one, and number two is just, I think it comes down to this over reliance on the government to kind of solve our problems. And it's put us into this crazy amount of debt. And now it's just cycled completely out of control. Um, despite being conservative, I'm not a full libertarian. I do think that some social safety nets are probably required in a big society. I don't think we can just privatize every single thing away, although I do think that, we need to look at small government, tightly controlled finances, and innovating wherever we can. But people got used to government money, and they got used to this idea that debt isn't that bad. Um, and it's just spiraled completely out of control. And I mean, we talked about this briefly before we hit the record button. You know, I know originally we kind of talked about, let's talk about post pandemic Canada. Let's roll it back. We're still living in the false economy from post 2008 financial crisis. In my opinion, we are still living in a false economy in which the people that perpetuated that and the people that did all those shady, mortgages and all the shady lending and that, none of them went to jail. You got to remember the Panama Papers. Panama Papers showcased all these people hoarding wealth outside of Canada. The only person that got in trouble for it was the journalist that reported on it. She died in a car crash. So, it's, to me, we're broke. And when people are scrambling for money, when people don't feel financially secure in their neighborhoods, and then they just turn on the boob tube and they say, okay, well, let's watch team A fight team B and that, and, you know, it'll just work itself out. And I think that's what happened. I think we fared better than the states did throughout the crisis, but we're still living in this false dichotomy of an economy.
I have a catchphrase that kind of goes along with what you're saying, and I say, complicity got us here. Complacency keeps us here. So we were happy with the status quo, and now we just kind of look outside and, is today a day that looks okay to go out in? So we just kind of come to accept that things have gotten really terrible, but maybe they're not as terrible as tomorrow is. So maybe I can just kind of take it on right now.
Well, remember was it Ken Hardy, the MP, who said that Canada has problems, but it could be worse. We could be like some third world countries. And I thought, oh, that's a great metric. Good job. Quiet down, pleb. You could be living in North Korea, and then you'd have real problems to complain about. Like
Well,
that
yeah,
it's
there was one MP that just literally came out and said, "Sure, we're bad, but we're not as bad as Afghanistan." Like
yeah.
this was like 3 days ago. And I was like,
I mean, wow,
"We're
what a marker, what a benchmarker. I mean, and it's funny they want to talk about Afghanistan while our diplomat that was over in Afghanistan had her own Saigon moment, helicopter off the landing pad, fleeing for her life, leaving behind all the people that were working for the Canadian government for years, whether it be, through the ANA or whatever, leaving them behind as the Taliban swooped in, or telling Canadians, take cover and then flee to a neighboring safe country and then contact the embassy there. I mean, that's Canada now. That's strong and free Canada. Um, our diplomat literally having like a last flight out of Saigon moment, coming back to Canada, and then it's just like that's the country we live in now. So yeah, yeah, we're better than Afghanistan. Really? Really?
that's your win. We're not as bad as the Taliban." Oh, that's promising. So
But are
there's
we?
yeah,
Are we better than the Taliban?
and there's like, where do you go from there? Like, you can only go up, right? And as stretching as it is, and I mean what we've seen over the last week, we're not going up, we're going down. Like we're still spiraling out of control. Did you watch any of the House of Commons with the debate over the non-confidence vote?
I watched clips posted online, but I'm going to be honest, I will watch some of the House of Commons debates, but I generally don't because I don't believe any of it's sincere. I believe it's a TV show for our
Political theater.
entertainment. Yeah, it's political theater.
And I don't doubt that, but it is to raise awareness. And I think probably the best places that we've seen some of this is in Ogo, where we've actually started to see it is political theater. Don't get me wrong. Like we're not getting any resolution out of this. We literally just watched, one company, GC Strategies. Uh, they committed perjury inside of the House of Commons. We know that they committed fraud
Has
with
anyone ever told a truth inside the House of Commons?
I don't know. I'm not going to go there. And then the final thing is they were held in contempt. There was zero that happened. There were zero repercussions. This is what we consider the highest court of the land, the House of Commons. People showed up, they lied, committed fraud, and contempt of court or contempt of the Commons, contempt of committee, and there nothing happened. There wasn't there were like when we see when Trudeau breaks ethics and he gets smacked with a fine of $500. We've seen this company that made millions of dollars off the backs of taxpayers for their own personal gain lie inside of the House of Commons, inside of committee, and they weren't even smacked with a $5 penalty.
Well, what did you expect, Sheldon? That's the game. That's the game. It's like, okay, it's like you got to think of it this way. Put it in context like this. Some celebrity says something bad or they did something they weren't supposed to do, right? So what do? They contact their publicist and they say, "Okay, you got to get me back in here, boss. You got to throw me back in the game." So what do? They do an apology tour. They hit up Oprah, and that she's usually the last stop. They'll usually hit up a couple of the friendly news stations and they'll get on the Oprah show. And then Oprah will lightly chastise them for their bad behavior. And then she, like almost like a priest, forgives them. And then they're back on track. And so it's the same thing to me with the House of Commons. Okay, yeah, you got caught doing something bad. It's time for you to do your mini struggle session, but it isn't really, it's theater. Um, and do that. Everyone looks, they say you're a bad person, you did bad things, and then it's time to move on. You made your money, everyone made their money. It's all part of a game. It's a game. Okay, people, what was it? Donald Trump joked around that you could shoot someone in broad daylight on Broadway and he wouldn't get convicted. I think he made some type of joke or something like that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Justin Trudeau could shoot someone in broad daylight in front of the frickin' parliament building, and we would do 20 years of committees to figure out if what he did was justified or not. And then finally it would just die off and you'd never see jail. Like, that's just part of the game.
Well, yeah,
If
I mean, like they're just talking about the election interference again. Like we just went through a non-confidence vote yesterday. We don't even have, why would we want, as Canadians, why would we want to go into another election where we haven't even had a proper investigation sorted out who the 11 MPs are that were bought into their positions?
Old news,
Like,
Sheldon, old
yeah,
news. We moved on. We moved
yeah.
on. And you got to realize the number, the corruption and all the crazy scandals, the reason why they happen so many times and so often, it's to overwhelm you. We can start talking about scandals now, and within 5 minutes we'll be like, oh yeah, but remember that one, and oh yeah, I forgot about that one, and there was this one, and did anything come of that? No. There's so many now, and in my opinion, it's meant to overwhelm you. There's so many, you can't get your head straight. By the time you start thinking, man, foreign influence, really need to look into this. Well, now we're on to the new scandal, and maybe there's a manufactured scandal over something else, and it's it's literally, we've bureaucracied ourselves to death in this country. We truly have. And you have to remember, there truly is a two-tiered justice system in this country. If you and I frauded millions of dollars out of a private company, we would go to court, we'd be found guilty, and we'd be hauled to jail. But fraud a few million dollars out of the government, yeah, just wait a few years, and when the heat dies down, you can probably be a contractor again, or you can start up a shell company and that with your friends and have them be the main owners, and you slip by the vetting process and you're in. Like, it's a business.
The biggest part about that I find the most upsetting, you know what, actually it's probably the most fascinating part is as long as you don't apologize for what you've done wrong, in a couple of weeks it'll die away. If you did apologize, people will continuously drum up your apology for the rest of your life. So
Mhm.
the what everybody's starting to learn is yeah, you can commit crimes because, yeah, you're not going to be held responsible. And as long as you don't talk about it, acknowledge it, or apologize for it, in a couple of weeks, nobody's going to remember anyways.
Never say sorry. I
Never
I
say, yeah. And, and,
well,
and that's to me, that is just, it's mind boggling. It's crazy.
because as soon as you show any sign of weakness, that is not something to showcase that you're showing remorse. It is a new attack vector to attack you with. Tiger Woods. Okay, I know we're going back in time here. Remember Tiger Woods got drunk, crashed his car, and that, or he was high
The
on pills,
Cadillac,
or
yeah.
yeah, he was high on pills or whatever. And his wife was like talking about all this like crazy, he's out of control and that. And he got up there and he's like, I'm so sorry for all the things. I'm sorry for, I have to put my faith in, I need to develop my faith. He did this pathetic apology, and it carried on this thing in the media that was like a feeding frenzy. Like, I couldn't believe it. Maybe it's because nothing interesting ever happens in golf, that they got so interested in it, but they just had this feeding frenzy. And I thought, you know what? If he had gotten up there and said, yeah, I'm rich, I'm banging celebrities left, right, and center, and I'm doing whatever the hell I want. Hell yeah, you should too if you got the money. If you have my money, you would be doing all sorts of crazy things. The media would die off instantly. The story's done, pack it up, move on, because
What about Andrew Tate? Isn't that basically what he's done?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the the allegations against him are pretty serious, and he has just carried on and said, yeah, these people are after me because I'm a free thinker and I'm that. And in some ways I think that he really has gotten people to believe that this is a big conspiracy, and that um you know and he again, he has his followers, and they're and because he never apologizes, and that makes him based and whatever, and um then they'll follow him till the ends of the earth.
And I literally give him like zero amount of my time. I've seen people flounder on Andrew Tate. Like I can't even the same way that people flounder on the royal family. I can't be bothered to get like this whole whoever is, not who she. I
Oh,
don't even know who.
Kate Middleton or whatever, and the
Yeah.
Photoshop stuff, and now she has cancer or something like that, I think.
Well, yeah. Now they're saying like even with the Kate Middleton stuff, like that she's posed supposedly in the UK, and it's a springtime photo. Well, that's not the weather that they're having there right now. It's freaking March.
Yeah,
So
but
why are
that's
they
a
having blooms on these trees? And then then it goes down to somebody's drilled into the fact that she doesn't have the same mole on the same side of her face anymore. I mean, I could care less about what's going on with the royal family,
yeah,
but
but
to
that's a
see how
British
people
thing.
flounder on these things, it's kind of amazing. On the unapologetic thing, I mean, you're from Saskatchewan. What's the support like for Scott Moe coming from an actual Saskatchewanian? Is that a real word?
Yeah. You know, Scott Moe, the SAS party, I'll say this. I'm conservative, but I don't hitch my wagon on any one party in particular. My stance has always been, if you do something that agrees with my values, I will applaud you and I will encourage you to keep doing those things. If you do something that doesn't agree with my values, I'm going to tell you it doesn't agree with my values, and maybe you should do something different or find a different way, whatever. So I don't want to say that I'm hung up completely on the Saskatchewan part. I've actually met Scott Moe a few times, and I do think he's a genuinely nice person, and that doesn't mean anything in politics at all. Um, but I do want to say, like, I have met the man several times. Um, you know, COVID, the mandates, Scott Moe. I wasn't very happy with the mandates. I wasn't happy with how Scott Moe handled the mandates and that. And maybe at the beginning when no one really knew what was going on, and let's do a 2 week thing to see just what the hell's going on to get more information. I don't think that something like that was unwarranted. But as the months went on, and then the IDs in the stores and that, and I was just thinking, like, conservatives aren't buying this. The majority of conservatives are not buying this, and you're not really listening to kind of your base on, you know, let's take appropriate measures. Let's take, like, appropriate and proportionate measures. Because here's the thing, a lot of elderly conservative people bought into it. And
Oh,
they
absolutely. 10
still
out of
bought
10.
into it. And really, at the end of the day, they were the highest at risk. I mean, my 90-year-old grandma gets the flu. Yeah, she might die from the flu. And I do agree that it was an aggressive flu. Um, but so much of this stuff, the shots and the Sask Health ID pass and stuff like that, like, in my opinion, he bought into it too much. Um, that being said, he has stood up to the feds on some things, and in some ways, it seems like he's capitulated in some areas. I think he could be a little bit more fiscally responsible. I do think that in some areas he's overspent. Um,
Like
you
what?
know, the well, like, there was a bunch of money, for example, during the scamdemic, there was a bunch of money in regards to highways. So they started doing passing lanes and highways. Um, and while that's nice for the cottage country people, um, I still think that instead, if you don't put in passing lanes, just twin the damn thing, if that's what you're going to do. Because the passing lanes, in my opinion, they were trying to burn money, and so that they burned it on these highway infrastructure projects. So to me, I didn't think that was necessary when, for example, we could really use some new hospital buildings. Some of the hospitals in this province are pretty old and they could use, we could use something like proper detox centers, things like that. And I'm not saying that those things may not be on the way in the future, but when it came to some of the spending, I was kind of like, I get it. You're trying to make jobs, quick jobs for people. But maybe if we had taken a more proportion response, maybe so many people wouldn't have lost their jobs in the first place.
That's a good point. With the carbon tax thing, you guys have carbon tax that's now removed from your home heating.
Yep.
That seems to be a pretty big win against the federal government. Does Saskatchewan view that as a big win?
I think most people in Saskatchewan view it as a win, but it's not far enough. It's not far enough. They just want to see the carbon tax gone. So they're saying that, they're appreciative, but they're saying, okay, now go the next step. Just say we're not remitting it, period. Now that comes with a lot of risks, in my opinion, because then we could look at something where now the feds are going to just put it on your income tax or, like at a federal level. Um, so I do think there's some risk that goes there, but I think the majority of people are saying, okay, that's a good start. Now get rid of the whole damn thing. What I thought was amazing is when I saw that the prime minister was talking about, Scott Moe could be arrested, I thought, oh man, you you're getting into some dangerous areas. You're really dangerous. You want to arrest the premier of a province for doing something that you've given exemption for in Atlantic Canada? I mean, good luck. Good luck.
And
Maybe
that's actually a big point because I know that Alberta tried to dodge the tax by taking this up to court and saying it's unconstitutional. And of course, the Supreme Court came back and said, no, you got to pay it like everybody else.
screw the courts. Supreme Court of Canada. I'll say something here, and you mentioned earlier that the House of Commons is the ultimate law of the land.
Not the law,
Complete.
but I mean, it should be the place
It,
for the big discussions, right?
it should be. We have a party in Canada. I know we don't got a lot of time left here. I just got a message saying your hour from my spouse. Your hour's almost up, and that. um, very very key thing. The Supreme Court of Canada is the only party that matters in Canada. It is the only party of substance that matters because the Supreme Court of Canada can strike down any law. It can uphold any law it wants. It can strike down any law. It can take a law and say, you need to bring this back to the table. You need to redo it. You need to put in provisions, and that is the power we've given to these judges and to these political ideologues. They are the law of the
Unelected
land.
officials.
They're unelected. That we did not elect them into power, and yet they can say this is unconstitutional. Get rid of it, or whatever, or and they can make that decision. No one else in Canada can make that decision. They can. So if we had a referendum tomorrow, let's just do something crazy. We had a referendum on the death penalty, let's say, and 80% of Canadians turned around and said, we need to reinstate the death penalty. So the government says, hey, we gave every person in Canada a chance to vote. 80% of them said death penalty is in. So we've drafted this legislation. We're going to put it into place. They put it in place, and the Supreme Court says, no, we don't think that's right. Get rid of it.
Well,
They don't have to follow the will of the people.
That's the
They
same thing that
don't.
we just went through with the carbon tax.
Yeah.
Um, One more thing, and I mean, I know we're catching up to an hour, and I appreciate you giving me some time. And this is on a Friday night.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
you're married and whatnot. But like I
I
read
know.
today that the RCMP inside of Saskatchewan, when they pull you over, they're going to go to breathalyzing everybody. Like, is that just media hype, or is that actually something that was proposed? And what's your thoughts on that? I mean, that seems crazy.
So I actually have a friend who's a lawyer, and I reached out to them and I asked, and apparently this was codified into law a few years ago. So it is legal. It's already been tested.
And that's in
Um,
the province of Saskatchewan, or is that across Canada?
it is, let's see if I can pull it up really quick without going too much over time here. Okay, very, very quick here. Um, okay. Um, Lady that I know that is a lawyer says police have had the right since 2018. Defense lawyers warned about it, but no one cared. Mandatory alcohol screening 320.272. If a peace officer has in his or her possession an approved screening device, the peace officer may, in the course of the lawful exercise of powers under an act of parliament or an act of provincial legislature or arising at common law, by demand, require the person who is operating a motor vehicle to immediately provide the samples of breath that, in the peace officer's opinion, are necessary to enable a proper analysis to be made by means of that device and to accompany the peace officer for that purpose. So there you go. It's in the law.
No, and that's under reasonable conduct. But what it sounds like the new legislation or the new rules are is we don't care why we're pulling you over. There doesn't have to be any reason to
Mm-hmm.
we don't even have to suspect you of drinking. We're just going to give you a breathalyzer. We pull you over to say you got a broken tail light. We're giving you a breathalyzer. We pull you over because
Mm-hmm.
you went through a yellow. You get a breathalyzer.
Oh, and the thing with the provincial laws on driving, there's a million infractions. Every day, I think they said like a person commits at least 10 traffic infractions that drives regularly per day. And that's just at the low end and that. Like there's a million things. Like if you turn into, let's say you make a left on a light and you make a left immediately into the right lane and not the nearest lane, you've already committed a traffic infraction.
I do that
This
every
just
day. Every day I do that
yeah.
exact
And
same
it,
thing.
and everyone does because if not, they'll never fucking let you in on the right lane. Because someone will turn into that lane and then they won't let you in. So I mean everyone does it. And I've never heard of any cop pulling anyone over for it. But here you go. Okay, I pulled you over because you did this. Now breathalyze up. Right. And the thing is, you have to remember driving is a privilege in Canada. It's not a right. And that's quite often what's used in these court cases. So
Well, and I agree with that. And especially now, because I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Going through COVID, traffic was beautiful, man. Like there
mhm.
was fucking nobody on the roads. Like it was a great time to drive. And then as people started immersing, and I'm not sure about the influx of people inside of Saskatchewan, but I know Alberta's had a lot. And
Mhm.
it's not just that we've had a lot of people come here, we've had a lot of people that are not used to driving here. And especially in Calgary or on the QE2 between Edmonton and Calgary.
Oh, I know.
It's terrible, man.
It is
The left
terrible.
lane is the worst. I
It's the
mean,
Autobahn.
no, it's not the Autobahn. It's the granny lane. Like you can't get up to speed on the QE2. Nobody's getting speeding tickets on the QE2 anymore because there's with the traffic that's out there and with the speed and because nobody respects the left lane as a passing lane anymore. You can't get up past 110. You could if you can get up to 100 in a lot of places.
Oh
You'd
man,
be
I don't know.
lucky.
I don't know about that. I mean, I've taken the highway a few times, and every time I've been the highway, I just see the left lane, and it's just like it's like you'll be doing 120 and that in the right lane, and it's like you're just standing still. People fly by, and
Well,
then you see them pulled over after.
Some, but I mean, very exceptional. Between the QE2, which extends, of course, into the Deerfoot, I don't th- I'd be almost positive that nobody can get a speeding ticket on the Deerfoot, especially during rush hour. Not that it was really easy to do that before.
Hmm.
We look at Crowchild Trail. We look at John Laurie Boulevard. We look at even the new Ring Road. And I like to boogie along. I got places to go. I got things to do, man. I don't want to be caught in traffic. There's
Hmm.
not a lane that you can get into.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Do I think that the drinking and do I think mandatory breathalyzers are an overreach? I do. I do think it's an overreach. I don't think if you have a broken taillight, you should have to give up your bodily fluids to the government for examination. I don't believe that. However, I could see my opinion on that changing if I had had a family member or close friend die or be seriously injured by a drunk driver. And I could see that increasing exponentially if there was more than one.
Agreed.
And
Do you think that the lockdown measures throughout COVID have introduced a little bit of complacency into what we're going to allow into these restrictions? Because you say if you had somebody that died under the hands of a drunk driver or an intoxicated driver, I understand that. If you had somebody that died from a respiratory virus, I mean, that's when we were all in this together. That's really what kind of whipped us into this compliance, this complacency with we'll just do whatever the government tells us to do. And now that we're out in this post-scamdemic world, we're starting to see these things being reintroduced or these ideas being introduced into places they shouldn't be introduced to. I think.
I agree with you in principle. I agree with you in principle. I do think the difference is drinking and driving is something that people can control. And we've had public education campaigns that go back to the 70s, even.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
so I think everyone in their rightful mind knows if you drink and you drive, you're you're running the risk that you could get into an accident, you could harm someone, and everyone that's drunk and driving thinks that they're going to be the fine one on the road. I'll be the fine one. I'm driving just fine until something happens. The difference between that and catching a virus that you know you really, if you're going to get it, you're going to get it. You touch a doorknob that someone else who had the virus, whatever virus, it doesn't have to be a respiratory virus, it could be a freaking parasite.
Yeah.
And that you can take all the precautions in the world,
Pink eye.
um, but at the end of the day, you don't make a choice to get that virus. You don't make a choice to get that. So I think that's the big difference, is that drinking and driving is a deliberate act. um, I do think that there's a correlation between people's views on breathalyzer tests and that by the police, and the penalties for drinking and driving. I mean, the joke is, if you ever want to get cheap prison time, get drunk and then run someone over you don't like, because you'll get a less sentence in that, because you'll just say, oh, I was intoxicated. And although the courts have repeatedly said that that's not a defense, we see it all the time where people that are drinking and driving seem to get more lenient sentences. I mean, I recently shared a GoFundMe. There was a lady, she was impaired off of two drinks in Saskatoon, and she ran over this teenager going about 60 kilometers an hour. She hit him. He's paralyzed now for the rest of his life. And do you know what she got for a sentence? Just take guess. Random
Loss of
guess.
license in 2 years.
2 years to be served in the community.
I
She
don't know what
didn't
that
go to
means.
jail. So she doesn't go to jail.
Oh, so she's raking leaves at the high school.
So yeah, she ruined this teenager's life, and she doesn't even go to jail.
And her insurance won't cover her, which means that this child is now a taxpayer liability to have a ruined life and for everybody else to take the responsibility with the exception of her.
Exactly. So Yeah, I do think that I agree. I see where you're coming from, but I do think there's a distinction. Unfortunately, though, I'm getting yelled at over text message now that it's time to wrap it
To,
up.
to wrap it up, hey, you know what, Russell, we'll have to do this again, man. It was a
Hmm.
really great time having you on and having some conversations, and it just this hour slipped away. Like this is probably the fastest time that I've spent on one of these calls, and it was amazing. So you've had some good points. I'm gonna when I post this, I'm gonna post some links to your podcast so that people can kind of keep up. I think you've got a really good message, and I think you're in the right age group that you could start teaching some of us old guys, what it's like. Give us a refresher course on where we came from and what it means to be a part of our communities, and being a part of the difference that we really want to see in Canada, and and go from there. So I'll throw up your link to your profile on Twitter. I'll throw up a link to your podcast. And again, I appreciate you taking some time with me tonight. And yeah, we'll talk again, my friend.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Sheldon. I really appreciate it. And we'll definitely talk again.
All right, have a good night.
You too.